Happy New Year! Hello, big fella. We are back. It's 2025 and it is all on. Bruce Aitchison from Happiness Egg Shape reporting for duty, sir, and the editor extraordinaire, the one and the only Gavin Harper. Hello, my man. How are you?
Happy New Year, Bruce. How's things in the world of Happiness is Egg Shaped and everything else that you do?
It's cold, but it's good. Look, I've got my brand new Pigbarians hat on. We're both Pigbarians, me and you. It arrived in the post today, so that's going well. My wife got me a wedding ring for my Christmas because I've not had one for a wee while. I've got my Doddy snood on. So yeah, life's busy, but life's good. How about you?
Yeah, all good. I had a week off last week, or certainly a week of downtime.
Did you get something for it?
Straight back to it.
Did you get something for your week off?
Yeah, thanks very much. Very good. Old ones are the best ones. Yes, and yes. Straight back to it this week.
And it's all happening, and we've not really spoken since the tail end of the 1872. So we've had Hampden, which we picked the bones of for a long while, and I think everybody did. And some of the Edinburgh players probably felt like it was 6 months between games rather than 6 sleeps. But Hampden to Murrayfield, two amazing venues. A bit to go with Hampden, but Murrayfield felt good. I know the game maybe didn't produce, but big crowd, all connected up, the bottom of the bowl full. I thought the atmosphere was decent, but the game was close, so that helped. It was an interesting day, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And look, I think you mentioned there, the Edinburgh players will have felt like it was weeks and weeks and weeks between the games, but actually the opposite now is true of Glasgow, who Franco was pretty upbeat, complimentary of Edinburgh after the game. But let's not make a mistake that Franco's written that game off. They'll have been annoyed, disappointed that they lost that, and probably weren't able to put their best performance out. So look, this break will have felt like 2 weeks, will have felt like 2 months to them, and they've obviously got a huge game this weekend against Racing. So a big opportunity for them. For Edinburgh, look, they had to do something to bounce back. Look, it wasn't the prettiest of games, but I think what Edinburgh did was really got on top of Glasgow, sort of stifled them, if you like, and maybe made it that bit more of an arm wrestle than they had done in the first game. And I thought, Edinburgh we talked before the game about Edinburgh having a wee bit of maybe a different bench, a different dynamic. Hamish Watson obviously came on early doors, but like somebody like Schumann made such a difference. And you just hope that after such an up and down first half of the season, that's the result that then is the catalyst for Edinburgh going to Van. They win there. They've got Black Lion, and all of a sudden you could be looking at, 3 on the spin, which would be a massive thing to kick off the new year and would put them probably in the playoffs for the URC, but also probably qualified for the Challenge Cup knockouts, which is where they want to be.
Yeah, so let's stick with Edinburgh just now, and we'll get to Glasgow, who've named their team. But Edinburgh, that sounds like one of the things they're happy to verbalise. Like they want to make progress in Europe. They want to get through. So they're going to pick as strong a team, I think, in every game that they can. And it's probably important for momentum to keep that going. Van, it should be a decent trip. It's not that far. There's a support going because they're chartering the plane. So, they're taking some people with them, which hopefully adds a bit to the atmosphere and also just makes them realise people are willing to put their money where their mouth is and go and support the club. And I was listening, I don't know if over Christmas you watched any of the Alec Ferguson documentary and how he followed Matt Busby with the you can make folks' lives better by how you perform. Now, it's a different situation, of course it is, but that crowd that turned up at Murrayfield and even the crowd that turned up at Hampden, 70,000 folk over the course of the 2 games. Now, I know a lot of them were the same folk, but it's a lot of people willing to support the game. And if you're looking for a bigger reason to perform and find that extra % to perform, and folk getting on the plane to go down to Van in January when times are tough, there's a lot of support for the game.
Yeah, totally. And I think, maybe elsewhere, rugby's not in that great a shape if you look at what's happened in with the Premiership clubs, and there's now talk of Newcastle being up for sale and possible, Saudi investment and all that kind of stuff. But like the 2 Scottish teams have got decent supports for the sort of size of the clubs. I think Hugh Jones spoke earlier in the week about Glasgow getting in more recognition in the city, which is obviously dominated by the 2 football teams. Like, I think that would be the next step. Glasgow maybe haven't really done that yet, despite winning the URC, but I still think there's progress to be made there. But look, you're right about Edinburgh. Like, nobody wants to go away and supporters make the trip and you don't perform. And I think for Edinburgh, there have been occasions this season where they haven't performed away from home. You think of the Lions game, but like the Ospreys just before the autumn, they were pretty dreadful, and that was actually a dreadful spectacle. So look, like that Glasgow win has to be the spark now that they've got to find some consistency. I'm fed up saying Edinburgh on paper are a really good side.
Yeah.
But Edinburgh, in reality, have failed to deliver for far too long on a consistent basis, but they prove all the time they can beat a big team in a one-off game. So, look, I think you're right. I think continuity of selection in some areas will be important. I think also, I wonder if these 2 games, Sean Everett has one eye on the Six Nations and just making sure that guys aren't playing huge minutes. But I expect Edinburgh to go strong 2 weeks running, and really they should be targeting 10 points from these 2 games.
I was really chuffed to see Darcy Ray signing a contract extension, because he was one of those guys that sort of came around and then he disappeared down south. And, I've spoken about local bias before when we're talking about Edinburgh and Glasgow. And Darcy Ray almost seemed to disappear, and you wondered if he was going to, a lot of players go away and they come back, but he seems to have come back. He's had his injury troubles. He was never really a stick-on first choice, and he's probably still not a stick-on first choice. But, he got back in the Scotland squad, and he seems like he's pretty determined, and he's done well, and he's come off the bench, but he's also been trusted to start, whereas previously our tight heads, it was WP and then whoever else, whereas now it looks like Hill and Darcy Ray have shared a bit. Sebastian's back, I know that, but I was really chuffed to see that. He's a Scottish prop playing in one of the Scottish teams. Who knows what the next 2 or 3 years, and better than me, props tend to be maturing like fine wine.
Well, that's it. I would like to offer a caveat there that I think I managed 1 game in the front row in all the days that I played. But now, look, I think Darcy Ray is somebody like when he was at Bath, he was playing regularly, playing almost every week, and he was playing well. But he seemed to have fallen out of that Scotland picture. And sometimes you get a sense that once a player is out that picture for a significant period, it almost becomes almost impossible for them to get back in. But in Darcy Ray's case, he's come back to Edinburgh. Look, he spoke to us earlier in the week, and he was saying that last year he was living in Glasgow, and he was, instead of meeting up with his Edinburgh teammates, he was going walking the dog with Jamie Batty. So,
can you imagine bumping into the pair of them? Can you imagine bumping? I wonder what kind of dogs those two have. Did they enlighten you? Like, Jamie must have a pit bull, surely.
Yeah,
like,
we definitely should have asked. I can't imagine they're both out walking chihuahuas.
Like, there's a podcast, dog walking with Darcy and Batty. Like that would. Can you imagine? What are those two talking about? I would love to have joined them on one of those dog walks.
I think that's the problem with it being a podcast. Is it's probably a lot of stuff that's not broadcastable.
I don't know. They're pretty highbrow, those two.
I mean, yeah, Jamie's just passed his pilot's license. So
I know, what a boy.
Maybe a bit of chat about flying planes. Yeah, he certainly has. What were we talking about? Darcy Ray.
I think so.
I think it's great. I think, he's moved through Edinburgh. He's basically totally committed now. He's saying to the club, the city, even though he totally admitted earlier in the week that he's got no idea where he's going, whether it's to Murrayfield or even trying to navigate his way home. So,
tell you what, that contract must be worth a bit of cash if he's bought a house in Edinburgh.
Well, far be it from me to disagree, but yeah, it must be. I think Scottish tight heads are. I feel like we're now getting to a stage where there are a lot of them, but there's nobody kind of grabbing that opportunity to become, if you like, the new WP Nell, who's like the reliable understudy to Xander and is tried and tested at that sort of top level. So, you throw Javan Sebastian, Darcy Ray, Miller Mills, Will Hurd all into that kind of mix, and let's see what happens, because that bench spot for the Six Nations could be anybody's.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that Darcy's there. I think it's a good move. If nothing else, there's a bit more depth and stability. That squad seems to be like it's being crafted for the next period of time. There's question marks for punters like us to chew over. When's his contract up? When's he being renewed? But it seems like they're sort of going along, ticking them off. And the Van game, I mean, I can't even pretend to know anything about Van other than Rudy Brown's there. And we've got somebody else at Van, have we not?
Not as far as I'm aware, but they do have a couple of names. Anton Bressler, who played for Edinburgh a few years ago, I think is now there. And they signed Mako Vunipola in the summer. So look, they're obviously struggling in the top 14, but that's a tough league. And actually, they've had a couple of games. I think they were like 20 points up a couple of weeks ago against Bordeaux. Should have won that and didn't. They were ahead against Clermont at the weekend and contrived to lose that. So, look, for them, staying in that top 14's got surely what is the priority. Like, that seems obvious.
Yeah, you just wonder the psychology of these things, because the French want to win at home, and this is obviously a home game, but do they want to risk an injury in this where they're unlikely going to make progress, and they've got bigger fish to fry in the top 14? So I'm interested to see how it goes. And Edinburgh, I would imagine, will want it to be a step towards this, gaining a bit more consistency of performance, getting a result, getting closer to playoffs, and building a bit of positivity around the place.
Well, yeah, totally. I think you've hit the nail on the head. But I think it'll not be, if folk look at this and say this is the game against the bottom team in the top 14, if Edinburgh go fully loaded, this is an absolute gimme. I think Edinburgh's away form is so poor, that's such a leveler. I think this will be closer than people probably think, but you would like to think, without tempting fate, that Edinburgh probably just have enough to get over the line and kind of hopefully show that next step of, as you say, the consistency.
Yeah, it's too hard to call. You know, Edinburgh have got to gain some trust by knocking these games over. There's been too many peaks and troughs to feel like there's a level of consistency that can be expected. It's hoped and on paper and yada yada, all those things that we chew over all the time. But you know, if they can beat Van away, there's a tick in the column for an away performance. Black Lion come to Edinburgh, that's then 3 wins on the bounce, and all of a sudden January in 2025 is feeling pretty good, and they can start to build. Let's go along the road. Glasgow, you know, once upon a time, thinking you were playing Racing, you would probably be considering how many points it's going to be, and you're on the end of hiding. Glasgow are URC champions. They're flying. They're at home. It's a Friday night. It's cold and probably going to be pretty bleak. Racing are not the team they were. Like, without getting too excited and too cocky, you're beginning to think, hang on a minute, this could be an absolute belter for Glasgow.
I genuinely don't see why not. Like, Glasgow in this, you know, you're right. In this day and age, you now look at the Glasgow team and say, okay, Hugh Jones, Tui Pilotu, Tom Jordan, Xander, you know.
Sorry, I'm going to hit pause on you there, because you know what I'm finding really interesting just now is the number of pundits and ex-players who are picking Lions teams, and the back line is Scotland. You know, you've got 10, 12. No, I'm not having but if the team was picked by pretty much any pundit at the moment, you're looking at Finn, Sione, Hugh Jones, Duan being stick-ons for 90% of the people picking teams. And then depending on who you speak to, Darcy Graham's in there as well. And all of a sudden, you've only got a scrum half and a fullback. And Blair Kinghorn. You're looking at a scrum half and possibly a winger that are not Scottish. That is mental in our lifetime. That is properly crazy. But when you think how many of them are at Glasgow, it's like they must be feeling 10 feet tall at the moment.
But you know, what's that? The saying: the first person you pick on your team sheets, you'll not agree with this, is your tight head, and the second person's your 10.
There you go, the other way around.
Yeah, you know what I mean. That sort of idea. But like the idea that Glasgow, I know he's not there now, but Glasgow could have contributed in some way, obviously through Finn, the 10, and then the tight head in Xander. And I think that Xander bit is becoming more and more a reality, that actually, like, forget the squad. Like, you're now looking at Xander saying, well, okay, Tadhg Furlong's been injured for months. He's hardly playing. He probably doesn't start the Six Nations unless something miraculous happens in the next couple of weeks. Like, Xander could be your starting Lions tight head. That Glasgow midfield could be the midfield, and then throw Finn in at 10, Blair at 15, one of the Edinburgh wingers at least. But I was talking to somebody earlier in the week about the nines, and like Jamison Gibson Park will start at 9 if he's fit, and even if he's not fit, he probably starts because Andy Farrell's the coach. But like, who are the other options? Thomas Williams, Alex Mitchell. I mean, yeah, okay, fine, but like,
I think we all know that it's George Horn.
George Horn and Ben White have got. If Ben White can string a few games together for Scotland and for Toulon at the end of the season, they've got to be in the mix. Like, it's just, and I think, to be speaking, like, I remember when there was 2 players, and 2 players felt like a lot on a Lions tour. But like, you could have 10 Scots on this tour, and it wouldn't feel ridiculous.
Sione for captain.
Again, like, Caelan Doris will probably be the captain.
Like, getting into Kite, probably fairy tale territory here. But can you imagine Sione going to Australia as Lions tour captain? Like, there'd be people spontaneously combusting on all sides of the world
Yeah, I would be particularly concerned, and I mean this in the nicest way possible, but I would be concerned for his granny because she would be doing an awful lot of media. Yeah, look, that would be an incredible, given where he obviously grew up in, that would be an incredible story.
Yeah.
Like,
I think that's what it is. It would be a story.
Somebody like Finn, though, won't be far away. He's got 80 plus caps. He'll be in that conversation as well.
Nah, I'm not.
He will.
Nah,
he will.
I think he's not in the captain conversation. He's in the leadership conversation. You build their attack, but I'm not convinced they're giving him the captain armband.
I just think if you look at, yes, Caelan Doris will probably be captain, but like there's always something like look at.
Watch this. Andy Farrell's going to pick his Bairn. His Bairn will be first choice 10. Andy will be captain. Andy will get to decide. If he wants to throw the lineouts in, he can throw the lineouts in. It's the classic. It's the classic. My dad's the coach, so I'm goal kicking. That's what's going to happen. Owen Farrell's getting in. It's going to be like mini rugby all over again.
And he's going to play 10 one week, 12 the next, and Finn Smith will play, or Marcus Smith will play 10.
Yeah.
And
Owen's playing at fullback today, boys, because that's where he wants to play.
Yeah. Do you know what? Like, all joking aside, let's hope not for everybody's sake, because the Lions in Australia with one of Finn Smith, Marcus Smith, or Finn Russell at 10 would just be magic.
Aye. It could be fun. Or Tom Jordan. I saw the Penn Glasgow columnist for Scotland Rugby News. Somebody, I think Six Nations or somebody had tweeted one of those things. Who's the most underrated player? And straight away comes back with Kyle Steyn, which I have to admit, I'm probably that person. I'm the one who has underestimated, undersold Kyle Steyn. But it's going to be an interesting Six Nations selection, Gregor. And we've spoken about this heaps. How do you get 4 into 2? Blair, Kyle Steyn, Darcy, Duhan. How do you get those 4 into 3? And then you've got Tom Jordan. So it's going to be really interesting to see Gregor's selection of 1 to 15, but also the bench or Kyle Steyn and Tom Jordan on the bench with George Horn or Jamie Dobie. So between the 3 of them, they cover every position in rugby team, football team, volleyball team, and hockey squad, because the 3 of them are phenomenal. I just love it. And Kyle Steyn, the other bit he gives you, he's a captain. He's a leader.
Yeah, and that's like that probably
neither Darcy nor Duhan. Like neither of them can be pointed at as leaders in a rugby squad, and I don't think either of them are going to develop into leaders necessarily. But Kyle Steyn is given a captain's armband.
Yeah, and that's it. Like that's the bit of Kyle Steyn that people still massively, I think, undervalue. You see his worth and his like the way he's respected by the staff and the players at Glasgow. Like, he seemed a bit of a left field choice as captain, but he's taken to it brilliantly. I think he's obviously done great things, achieved a lot while he's been captain. Say what you want about having a captain on the wing, but like he gives you something that in that respect that Darcy and Duhan don't. I think what Gregor now is able to do, though, if we're talking about Six Nations, is say, okay, for example, we're going to get peppered by Prendergast or Crowley for Ireland. We know that a sort of aerial bombardment's coming. I'll pick Kyle Steyn. Does that mean Duhan misses out for a game? I think if that's the case, like it's not the end of the world. It's not, other people will write Duhan's been dropped, but I wouldn't necessarily see it like that. I think you've got to have a squad and you've got to be able to be confident enough that you use your squad properly, because let's face it, sticking to the same, 15, 20 players every game is is madness. But what I think Gregor has cut out over the last 18 months is this tombola of what felt like changes for change's sake sometimes. I think if probably most people would have a go at picking a Scotland team, they'd get 13 of the names, and there might be a couple that people disagree on.
Yeah. Rory Darge back, starting Matt Fagerson alongside him, and then I'm really pleased. I don't know Jack Mann at all, but I feel really pleased for the guy because he's, it must have been a long road, and now he's starting at 8. I know the competition maybe is on its way back, but I think he can feel pretty proud of what he's done, and it must give him some positivity moving forward.
Totally. Like, terrible 2 years where he's basically played no rugby, and he must have been thinking, I think he's 25 now. He must have been saying, well, where's this rugby career going to end up? Or is it going to end before I've kind of fired a shot, if you like? Now he's played the last 3 or 4 big games in a row. To have the trust of somebody like Franco to say, look, we're going to pick you at number 8 for both Edinburgh games, to go to Toulon and now to play Racing at home, like, that's massive. And I was saying to you just before we came on that, like, Jack Dempsey's obviously an international class player, a very, very good international player. But the way Franco does things, you wouldn't be surprised if Dempsey reappears, let's say next week against Quins off the bench, and he sticks with Jack Mann to give him that reward. But they also, Glasgow, have this total buy-in to the idea that, yes, Jack would be disappointed, Jack Mann would be disappointed if he wasn't playing next week. But they just seem to accept that that's the way it goes, So it's been an incredible run for him. I think he'll take loads from it. I would like to think that he's done enough to merit. I think he's out of contract at the end of the season, but he's certainly, to me, done enough to merit staying on. And when Dempsey comes back, Glasgow now know they've got a ready-made, when Dempsey's away, international or whatever, Glasgow know they've got a ready-made guy who can step in.
Yeah, I think that deal's already done. I think Jack Mann will have his extension, and I don't know, because I don't really understand how these things work, but it might be that at the end of Dempsey's contract, he's able to go south or go to France and make some money and know that Jack Mann's there and can play, and there's other players around. But, we speak a lot, or I do, or we do speak a lot about that Glasgow backline. But you look at that Glasgow pack, Sutherland, Matthews, Fagerson, Gregor Brown's the up-and-comer, but Cummings has been around, Fagerson's been around, Darge has, been a Scotland captain, and Jack Mann. So 6 of your 8 are very seasoned campaigners, with the bench of not too much experience there. Ali Miller's been around as a club player. Jamie Batty's obviously an international. So we get excited about the backline, but actually up front, there's a lot going on there. There's some battle-hardened individuals, and I'm delighted. I was chatting to Johnny Matthews the other day, and he spoke to us when he was on, saying the intensity at training's massive because of the depth in the squad and the way that Franco uses it. And he's buzzing to be back. He was gutted that he got taken off because he wanted a hat-trick against Edinburgh. He was gutted he missed the game at Murrayfield, but now he's back, and I reckon he'll probably get 5 tries at the weekend.
Right, you're saying 5. I was going to say 2, so... Right. Let's meet in the middle somewhere. 6. And look, like, he's just they've I think that's the thing with what I was saying earlier about that trust, and like, you very rarely, the Scarlets game's probably an example of a time that Franco's hand was sort of forced into picking a load of not first choice guys or back up, and it still worked. But as you said, when you talk about that team, Sutherland, Matthews, Fagerson, Cummings, Fagerson, Darge are all seasoned internationals. Therefore, Gregor Brown's played plenty of games, but you're asking him to still do a job in the second row. But the pressure's off because, for example, he's not having to think about calling lineouts. So essentially, second row and 6, you have to push a bit harder in the scrum, but you're still asked to run about, carry the ball, and get rid of people at rucks. So fine. And Jack Mann can kind of, number 8's his position. So again, with two guys really experienced either side of him, you'd like to think that takes the pressure off a wee bit. And I think that's the thing that Franco's got right all the time, is these guys are very rarely all thrown in at once. But look, that pack, again, keep saying this about Edinburgh, so I'll say it about Glasgow. That pack on paper is miles better than the Racing pack and should do a job on Racing. Lucio Sordoni was let go by Glasgow in favour of them bringing in Talakai, Schickerling, Finn Richardson. So you'd like to think Glasgow get dominance up front. It's a terrible night, freezing cold. Racing are struggling. They've not got Owen Farrell, they've not got Tuisova, and they've not got Gail Ficku. So for me, it's a Glasgow win. It's a pretty comfortable. It's a Glasgow bonus point win at home, and they move on. They go to Quins. They're probably qualified for the knockouts in some capacity.
Yeah, I have to admit, my knowledge of that Racing team is close to zero. The thought that they could go down to, I'd love to go down to Quins, but I still feel like they're an underestimated steamroller, Glasgow. I keep saying it, they're URC champions, yet I'm not sure I even give them the sort of benefit of the confidence. There's no reason to think what you've said there is outrageous. They could and should get a bonus point win against Racing on Friday night. They could go down to Harlequins and be pretty confident they're going to get a result there as well.
I mean, the reality is, barring, I think, a terrible start last year and then a sort of fall away in the last few minutes, Glasgow should have beat Quins last year. And that game, quite a few of the players have referenced that game as being the kind of kick up the backside they needed to say, right, we're actually going to go on a bit of a run, and we've learned the lessons of how we lost that game, which helped them then beat Stormers, beat Munster, go to Pretoria, win the URC, and now they've got a chance to go and say, right, well, we'll go and get one over Danny Wilson, our old head coach, and we'll show that we've learned all the lessons that we didn't learn, we didn't know 12 months ago. So, yeah, look,
Glasgow, the confidence that Glasgow has, to me, appears to come across as sort of happiness. Like they seem happy, they seem relishing to relish what's going on. Johnny Matthews was gutted that he wasn't available, and every player will say that, but the way Glasgow play and the energy and enthusiasm they seem to have, the way they talk, there's times where you can hear talk and that it's not believed. Glasgow appear to go about things in such a positive manner with confidence. They seem to have utter belief in each other and themselves and their coach. We don't hear a lot about the other coaches. It's always Franco. It's Franco. Franco wants, Franco does, Franco. And I like that because he is the focal point, but I've got no doubt he delegates well and he trusts his subordinates and he has, I like all that, but I love that he's the one that shoulders it all.
Yeah, I think that's it. You very much get the feeling that Franco's the man in charge. What Franco says goes, and I've said this before, when I was at Hampden before the game there to speak to Al Kellick, I get the feeling that even from an operations point of view, if Franco said, look, I don't like this X aspect about Hampden or Y thing about the training week or Z about the pitch, Glasgow would move heaven and earth to make sure that problem was solved because the boss says it's not right. Al Kellick might be the man on, that sits at the top of the tree, but it very much feels like from a rugby and from a performance point of view, Franco's that focal point. And I think he certainly has developed that squad and developed the setup that you can see he trusts players. So you assume he trusts all the coaches. And it does, as you mentioned it earlier, it does all just look happy, you know.
And, you know, they won the URC, and, you know, I still come back to there's no way that could be planned. There's no way that was, because nobody plans that short term to be that successful. Franco came in, the squad was, the performance was at such a level, there's no way anybody was going, do you know what's going to happen? Glasgow are going to win the URC. Not a chance. And even, you know, quarterfinal, semi-final, we still weren't really saying, you know, Glasgow can, and they did. But the way Franco has put things together and appears to have assessed the situation, put a plan in place, and I don't know if they've changed it 100 times or it's still that initial plan. It's just so impressive.
Yeah, totally. And I think when I spoke to Sean Everett actually earlier today, that piece will be on the site tomorrow, and he's talking about Challenge Cup and getting to the knockouts, and you just get a sense from Edinburgh that they kind of know they need to be at home in the knockout stages, because, you know, we've talked about their away forms being really poor, but even psychologically, I think that would be a big boost to the players, the coaches, the club. Glasgow, I think, could go to most places in Europe, maybe not to lose, and maybe, yeah, I mean, you know, that's probably the only one I can think of off the top of my head where they would think, hang on a minute, we're really up against it here. You know, they went to Toulon last month, and with loads of changes, they probably should have won that. Like, you know, and we're talking about teams that have gone, and I know Toulon aren't what they used to be. I know Racing have lost loads of players, but like I said 5 minutes ago, Glasgow should win a bonus point against a team that have been in finals at this competition. They should have just said they should have beaten Toulon, who are 3-time champions. So I do think Glasgow merit the talk that they're probably now getting in some parts, but I still think it's taken time for the majority to kind of catch up and say, well, actually, do you know what? One of the favourites for this could be the Glasgow Warriors. And that, like a massive statement win. The Sale win was huge, but a big score tomorrow night could really be the thing that people sit up and take notice.
Can you imagine? Here's another one. This so 2025. Sione is going to be Lions captain. Edinburgh are going to win the Challenge Cup, and Glasgow are going to win the Champions Cup.
And we've revived the Border Reavers, and they're going to win the URC.
Potentially.
Like, do you know,
the way I am with Glasgow at the moment, nothing would massively surprise me, because I kept underestimating them, and probably all last season I was like, yeah, you know, next one. I just couldn't see it, and I'm not close enough to really know. So I have to admit my ignorance there. But what a win, and the way they're going, and you just, you know, we all want Edinburgh to establish that level of consistency. We all want Edinburgh to perform, and they've got the second half of the season to really make a statement, and I hope they do. And we all hope they do. And you know, this is something again we've discussed before. Glasgow want Edinburgh to do well, just not as well as them. You know, Edinburgh want Glasgow to do well, just not as well as them. That's how this relationship works, and I like it. I think it's a good thing. And this weekend, I hope there's two really positive results. The other bit is we want to, looking at the bigger, broader picture, we want to have both teams flying so that when we get to Six Nations, we're properly debating who's starting, who's in the, like you said, we could probably predict 13 of the 15 positions, but let's have people sticking their hands up and saying, no, that's me that's in there.
Yeah, I wondered when you were doing your predictions just a minute ago, and Sione was the Lions captain, if that was after Scotland had won the Grand Slam, or if we were just leaving that for another pod.
Do you know, I'm back to this because 2 years ago I was all in. We were winning the Grand Slam, no question, and we made a pig's ear of that. And then this year I was like, nah, we could finish last. We could have an absolute shocker. This year, I am totally scrambled because although Delalio's saying England need a new captain and Austin Healy's having a go and Martin Bayfield's saying I'm sick of learning lessons, I want to win games, and I think England are going to be all right. France have got Antoine Dupont. They're going to be all right. Ireland are likely going to be all right. Italy are getting better, but then they've had a bit of a shocker since the Six Nations last year. And can Wales continue to be this bad?
I was listening to another rugby podcast with two presenters who've slightly more international experience, but I think less humour than us. And they were, Jim Hamilton and Andy Good were saying, what does success look like for Wales? And the consensus was success this year for Wales in the Six Nations is not finishing bottom. And I think that's probably about right. I think there are now probably two teams at the top, Ireland and France, then Scotland, then England, kind of in their own brackets, then Wales and Italy, and that could be to me, that's the wooden spoon. I think Ireland.
Did he say that?
I know. Here I go. I'll set myself up for a great fall. Ireland with no Andy Farrell, with potentially a few players missing. Somebody like Furlong could be a huge miss because he's not played for ages. The fact that game's at Murrayfield, I just feel like the whole Ireland thing against Scotland has to come to an end at some point. I think it's 10 in a row now.
Yeah,
Scotland Six Nations.
I get what you mean. That you're right. The Ireland thing does have to come to an end, but then surely we also have to beat the All Blacks at some point as well. The Irish thing. Well, we will this year. One of the things about and I'm not sure MD properly admits this, and I've spoken to a few people involved in Irish rugby, and they have this thing that Scotland make a lot of noise, and that we keep hearing about this generation of players, and Ireland has this bit of chip on the shoulder, and it's like, aye, quiet and doing, lads. There's still a feeling of Scotland make a lot of noise and didn't back it up, and that irks me massively, but to find your motive. Where do you find your motivation from? If Ireland's motivation is we need to keep patting them down, then that's what they do to find the extra 3 or 4% that means they win. Wales, I don't know where that's coming from. We could list 13 of the 15 starting Scotland team. I couldn't tell you MD plays for Wales. I know nothing that's going on there. I didn't understand. Mates of mine will say, "Oh, the Dragons are going to go." I say, "What? Why? How? Where's?" I know nothing about the situation. It baffles me, and I've not got the time or energy to learn about it. England cannot continue. If they have a poor Six Nations, Borthwaite's gone.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, but again, England have lost the last 5 games that have been within a score. So their first 2 games are Ireland and France. Good luck. Then we go to Twickenham, and I genuinely that should hold no fear for any Scotland player in the way that it did 2 or 3, 4 years ago. And before I know it, I've talked about winning a Grand Slam. But,
did he? A mate of mine tagged me on LinkedIn today. Somebody had messaged about doing a fantasy thing for the Six Nations, and a mate of mine, Mike Burrell, he played scrum half with me at school, and he commented, Bruce Aitchison reminds me every year, it's the hope that kills you. And that's what you've just done there. It's the hope that kills you. Because if we played the game on paper or on podcasts or in the pub or in the clubhouse, Scotland would be world champions, because we're back to this local bias of, we think we've got, it's England that worries me. Ireland and France, we probably need them to have an off day and we need to perform almost perfectly. Italy, we can't be as bad as we were last year. That was, and we were both there, and it was grim. It was so terrible to that 7 or 14 point swing of, we thought we'd scored and then we conceded, and then it just seemed to unravel before our eyes and nobody seemed to be able to stop it. Wales you'd like to think we'll beat Wales. It's the England game that almost everything hinges on.
Yeah, I think, you're right. We've totally digressed from talking about these two European games.
That was your fault.
We will get into the Six Nations definitely much more near the time. I thought you'd fallen over.
It's exciting.
I looked away there, and
I was just getting the dregs. I've treated myself a full fat can of Coke. I've not moved the length of myself for the last week, but I thought I'd earned myself a full fat can of Coke tonight.
Well, once you've had your full fat can of Coke, go out and get your Doddy steps in. What were we saying? Six Nations.
You were moaning that I had got us off Glasgow and Edinburgh and started talking about Six Nations, but I'm pretty sure it was you that did that.
It probably was. And you're right. That England game, because it's in the middle, because of, a record down there, and because of that fixture, it's massive. The Ireland game, it's huge. But I'm reminded every time I look at those Six Nations fixtures of sitting in both Rome and Cardiff last year and colleagues saying, as Wales run in try after try, Scotland are going to lose this. And thankfully, we managed to find a way of avoiding that embarrassment. But likewise in Rome, saying, this isn't looking good. And, Scotland nearly pulled it out the bag, but they didn't. And they were pretty dreadful that second half. So let's take one step at a time. I'm reeling in Grand Slam talk until Scotland are in Paris.
Until Glasgow and Edinburgh in the knockout stages of the European tournaments. Big fella, class to speak to you. It's good to be back. Let's keep it going. I'm looking forward to next week, because we'll be in the middle of something. They'll have played a game in Europe and they'll have another exciting one to come. Edinburgh team announced tomorrow. Is that right?
Tomorrow at 1 o'clock, yeah.
You already know it, don't you?
I have an idea.
Go on, break the news. Go on, tell us. Go on, tell us it.
They're only ideas, so we'll wait and see. Tomorrow at 1 o'clock, it'll be on our social media and on our website.
I remember when you were fun.
I remember when you weren't fun.
Do you? Well, it wasn't that long ago, actually. It wasn't that long ago.
There you go.
£4 for first 4 months or £18 for the year. Sign up now. It's 2025. Start the year in the perfect way with a subscription to Scotland Rugby News. I hope you've enjoyed it. Come on, Edinburgh and Glasgow. Let's get 2025 off to a belting start. He was Gavin Harper from Scotland Rugby News. I'm Bruce Aitchison from Happiness Egg Shape. Get involved with Doddy Aid too, and we'll see you all soon. Have a great weekend. Cheers.